Thank you for coming today to the Tuesday Times Roundtable. I'm here to introduce our speaker, Eric Feldman. He's the coordinator in the Office of Global Learning Initiatives, where he connects students to high-impact experiences, including internships and service learning. He has cultivated university partnerships with local community agencies, working on issues ranging from human trafficking to refugee resettlement. Eric completed his bachelor's in criminal justice and his master's in higher education administration here at FIU, and he is currently pursuing a doctor of education here. His research interest is concerned with public perception of law enforcement and improving police-community relations. His most recent article, The Influence of Social Media on Adult Learners' Knowledge Construction and Democratic Participation, appeared in the fall 2015 issue of New Horizons in Adult Education and Human Resources Development. Eric also holds appointments in the Honors College and the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center. Most importantly, he couldn't go on without Chipotle burrito bowls. Now I will turn it over to Eric.
Even in spite of the Holy Coli thing, I still can't go without Chipotle burrito bowls. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Bahia, for the introduction. Today's topic is about politics and social media, and it is not about really engaging people in action about politics over social media. So there have been a lot of articles online and other lectures at the university and stuff about people using Facebook. So there's a lot out there about how people use social media to encourage people to come out to rallies or to get out to vote or to organize and do. I've noticed that there's a lot less about what happens previous to that, which is just learning about the issues, discussing the issues, and forming an opinion on the issues. So today I'd like to talk about how we form opinions about political issues or just issues about society in general over Facebook and how we perceive the world. This comes out of something that I'm sure many of you have been through, which is seeing or perhaps accidentally participating in the posting or sharing of ridiculously, blatantly false things on Facebook and other social media sites. And I've been seeing this for years. And my first reaction was, okay, I don't care if I lose some friends over this. Every time someone posts something that's ridiculously false, I'm going to call them out on it, and I'm going to reply and say, this is ridiculous. How could you possibly believe this? If you just Google this, you would see all these articles telling you that what you posted is completely untrue. But then, rather than continuing that path, which is probably not the most polite way to go about it, I just got curious. I got curious about all of the ways people could learn about issues in a skewed way on social media, why this happens, and the implications of it. So I ended up doing some research on it and even publishing an article on it, and we're going to talk about it today. Before we get into social media specifically, kind of a general look at some of the background topics. And so a lot of this interest is guided by this question. So there's an article about media literacy, and it asks, we all have our own view of reality. So our own view of reality is we wake up, we know what's good, we know what's bad, we know which way's up, which way's down. We have perception of the world that the police are good or bad, or the military is good or bad, or the higher education system is either providing us with unparalleled opportunity or is completely screwing us over and indebting the entire nation. We all have these things that we just wake up and they're true to us. And so we've been building this reality since the day we were born. And the question is, where do we get it from? And ever since I read that question in this article, it's really spurred every piece of reading and talking about this since then. So I ask you, where do we get it from? How do you know what's good and bad and who's good and bad and what to do about poverty or about the education system or anything? Or you see something that you think is wrong and you go dismiss it and try to find everything that proves that your point was right and the thing that's telling you you're wrong is wrong. But oh yes, all of that, friends, family, social media, the media, anything else. Where do you get your view of reality from? Anything else? a lot of it is coming from the internet and television. It's from 2013, I think. So, whether it's one form of screen, whether it's the old kind of screen or the new kind of screen, 74% of the information you get on a daily basis about any topic is coming through a screen. It's some sort of mediated communication, either straight to you from the media or the people you're connected to online. And also, interestingly, is that over 3 decades, the amount of information that we get in front of our eyeballs every day has increased 72, nearly 73%. And this is really important to our conversation because it's not the fact that there's so much information to process is part of why it's so hard to sit there and filter out this is true, this is untrue, this is unbiased, this is skewed, because there's just so much of it to go through, and who has time for that? So the answer, where do we get it from? Omar mentioned a lot of great things, including offline friends and family. A lot of it is the media, as we just saw. And this same article where I got the "where do we get it from" quote has some really important things to understand about media literacy and when you get information from the media. So I wanted to run through some of them here. And one is that the media construct reality, which is kind of the answer to my first question. That the media is not often or ever reporting this objective reality. They construct the reality. And audiences can learn to deconstruct it. Audiences, us, you all, also make your own meaning out of it based on your own experiences. So two people can obviously look at a Fox News segment or an MSNBC segment and see two very different things and have very different reactions to it, even though they're watching the very same thing. And these last two will definitely come into play as we talk about the rest of this. Almost all media has commercial implications. Somebody's paying for it. And whatever you take from that, somebody's paying for it. And all media have value messages. Some of you may be familiar with the Simpsons episode with, if you read that backwards, it's Join the Navy. There's this entire Simpsons episode around a very a pop song and a new pop band singing this catchy song that was trying to convince people to join the Navy. So definitely seeing some messages in the media there. I'm so concerned about this, not just because it's frustrating to go through your Facebook feed and things are false and, okay, no big deal. I'm concerned about it because when people take action based on a confidence in a source that's unreliable, then there's real consequences. So this is not just, you read something, you have an opinion, maybe that opinion is based on false information. You're going to potentially go out and do something about it, and that's what's concerning. 2009, so this might have changed a little bit. I consider this an epic fail. Less than half of high schoolers can tell whether a web-based source is objective or biased. So if that statistic is still holding true, those are the students who are showing up here in a couple of years, or also going out and being politically engaged in other venues besides college. And some of the ways that you can take action on your unreliable sources are through votes, dollars, and time. It's not that people are consciously saying, I read this about Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton online yesterday. I'm going to just take this one source and go out and vote based on it. But if you think about reading about the election for months and months and months, or over a year of different articles, everything kind of stays back here, and you're no longer remembering, well, this was from this source which I trust, and this one wasn't. It's all kind of back there informing your view of someone. This could impact where you donate money to. I have an example in here later of different things going around the internet trying to say that certain charities are more efficient than others, and also where you go and volunteer, and also kind of what you talk to other people about. If you start believing that the welfare state is bankrupting us and we need to cut down on welfare programs, or the corporations are holding people down in poverty and we need to have more welfare programs to raise everyone up, you're going to go around and talk to people about that and take action on that. And it's important that whichever side of that you're on, or if you're somewhere in the middle, it's based off of real stuff. So now the main part of this, social media, I will tell you about my article at the end, because if you're really interested in this, this is where a lot of the sources behind the part in this section are in there, and you can go see where I've cited the sources and read more about it. What the article does and what this section does is break down all of the different ways you can get false information from social media. So there's a lot more than just, oh, someone posted something that was made up and someone shared it. I've identified 4 or so categories of different ways, and understanding them will help you look out for them and help you help other people look out for them, and maybe we can I'll become a more productive, reasoned society. I'm going to open with these two. Going to be my parenting style, I think. Facebook is still around back then. All right, so back to you. Before I tell you the different ways that you can receive the news from social media, I want to know your thoughts, both good and bad. So if you're engaged in reading about the news on social media, what are the implications of that? In what ways does it go wrong? In what ways does it go right? Why is it worth spending your time on social media clicking on articles and political stuff? Yes, sir. There's some interesting things here that I want to recap and make sure I got right, and that I want to tie into future things. One is that your experience on Facebook is based on what your connections on Facebook are posting. So it might be very different than the people on either side of you and what they see, because it's based on what your friends are posting. So you said that, right? I don't want to make that statement necessarily, but it's just different. It's different. And then number 2 is you said that there's a lack of expertise behind the articles that you see. And that's an interesting point, because it does concern me. But at the same time, I can see the counter-argument where when people tend to talk about how social media is good at spurring kind of political awareness, the fact that people don't need expertise to get their voices out is often cited as a good thing. So it might be a double-edged sword thing, because I am concerned about it. My whole reason for being here today is talking about false and unsourced stuff. But I want to throw out there that in some ways that could be good, and a lot of people have cited it as being good. Yeah. Some people are critical of media all the time, even when it's true. But here you had something. I'll try to recap what everyone's saying if I don't get close to you with the microphone. But that's actually something that's definitely going to come up on here in terms of having news with a similar world view being presented in your Facebook. Let me get one more comment from the back, and then we'll come back to comments later, I promise. So the question is, how do we determine what source is credible? Let me see if there's any answer to that before I move on, because I think that's really important, that specific question. So I can make all this ado about reading credible sources, but what is credible? Are established news organizations like CNN always credible? And you can definitely use the tone of an article to judge certain things. And I agree, a lot of it is just kind of a little commonsensical, but it's tricky. We'll definitely talk about it. Great. So definitely agree that even the credible news sites have bias. There's a difference between a source being biased and a source being false, and that's something we'll get into here. I'm going to get into a couple of the things that I found about it, and we'll have plenty of time after all that to get all the rest of the comments in here. So the first social media problem that I've identified, number 1, is something that a lot of you already said, which is the echo chamber. And so you might be familiar with this, and we can get into a little more deeply how this works. And it starts in a way that has nothing to do with Facebook itself. It just starts with the basic sociological concept that, for the most part, we spend time with people who are similar to us. Of course, we can have diversity of friends, but for the most part, most people are similar to us in some way, whether it's how they think or how they look. It's just what humans do. So even before you ever log on to Facebook, that's just true. Once you get onto Facebook, the people who are your friends on Facebook are then going to be people who are, for the most part, similar to you. And so even if Facebook showed you every single post that your friend made, Facebook interfered with those posts in no way whatsoever, you would be, for the most part, getting news from people who have similar viewpoints to you, because they're going to be sharing things that they agree with. They're similar to you. You're only seeing things that you agree with, for the most part, because your friends agree with things and they're the ones posting it. But then Facebook goes and magnifies this effect greatly, because Facebook's newsfeed uses algorithms to try to figure out what you want to see. And it does this in a lot of ways, including showing you things from people whose posts you like and comment on. You're going to see their posts more. Then it's going to take things like, do you like articles more than videos? Do you like political stuff more than like kind of the BuzzFeed type stuff? And everything you click, everything you comment on gets filtered through the system to show you what you want to see. And so there are some quotes from different articles, both on Facebook's site, from Facebook, about how newsfeed works, and then also from other articles, kind of admitting here that the Facebook algorithms work to show people what they want to see, not what is important for them to see, and that users who interact with feel-good stories, kind of the more BuzzFeedy stuff, will see fewer and fewer challenging narratives, kind of the more, like, let's look what's going on with Syrian refugees type stuff. And in terms of posts that disagree with each other, users who like more political posts on the conservative side or the liberal side are going to see more posts from that side, because this is the goal of Facebook. Its newsfeed is to show you what you want to be looking at. And so between you already getting content from people who are similar to you, Facebook makes sure you don't see things that you don't like. And that's a problem. If you're interested in this, this is from Time. I would look this up. Here's how Facebook's news feeds actually works from last July. It's on time.com, and it's crazy. You might have some idea that this is happening, but I guarantee you there's at least one paragraph in this article of something you didn't know. So it even talks about if you like a post after you've actually clicked in and read it, or if you like the post without reading it, those things get factored into your Facebook newsfeed algorithms in a different way as far as how it assesses if you actually liked that as a person. And you know, it's important to know, because if this is where you're getting a lot of your worldview, it's being heavily filtered. We'll come back to general comments kind of after all this. Is there any questions or experiences with this particular thing of, you know, people that you've noticed that you don't see stuff on your news feed from them, even though you know they're posting stuff, or you've kind of experienced this or don't experience this? My social media problem number 2 is that advertisers and spammers control much of what you see in both legitimate and illegitimate ways. And this goes back to the basic principle of media literacy that I mentioned earlier, that media has commercial implications, that someone's paying for it. Rudy over here is actually my TA in my honors class, and he told me I had to stop spending so much time in my class showing South Park videos. So rather than showing a South Park video here, I put a screenshot of a South Park video. And this is from this most recent season, where, you know, they're demonstrating that when you just go on and try to read the news, you kind of get sidetracked by all these ads, including ads that look like articles, that they're written like articles. They look like the news, but they're really trying to sell you something, and you can't escape that when you're going online to try to read the news. And then this is a real life example of that, and you see this a lot now. This is from The Atlantic, which is, you know, a fairly well known and long running publication. So they have on their website an article about Scientology and how well Scientology did that particular year. But then what do you see above the headline? Sponsored content. Other than that one little thing that says sponsored content, what's this? It is formatted in the exact same way as any other article on the Atlantic website written by the Atlantic writers, but it was just sent to them and paid for by the Church of Scientology. And you see a lot of that. So there are legitimate and illegitimate ways that people with commercial interests can influence what you see when you're scrolling through social media sites. You know, the legitimate way is exactly this: sponsored content and promoted posts. Whenever you see anything on Facebook or Twitter and it's promoted or sponsored, someone has paid to make sure that you see that before you see anything else. And then there are the less legitimate ways, like people hijacking hashtags. Does anyone know what I mean by that, hijacking hashtags? On Twitter, for example, you can have let's say that some of you were tweeting about Tuesday Times Roundtable, which doesn't seem to happen much for some reason. But if you were here, all tweeting about hashtag Tuesday Times Roundtable, and like it starts to trend at FIU because all 50 of you are posting about it. Then let's say Miros, the food truck guy, is on Twitter while he's making a delicious pulled beef salad, and he sees all these people are here. They might have run out of food. I'm going to go on Twitter and put, come to Miros after the hashtag Tuesday Times Roundtable. You're all going to see it, even if you wouldn't have otherwise seen it, because you're following that hashtag, which is supposed to be about what I'm talking about, but is really being hijacked by someone who wants to make money off of capitalizing on the fact that so many people are talking about that. So I wouldn't be surprised if this happened, during yesterday's Iowa caucuses, where somebody was like, come to my website and buy, my politics book because hashtag Iowa caucuses, even though it really had nothing to do with it. And that's not necessarily legitimate. I mean, you can do it, but if you're really stretching the means of what that topic is about, then you're not really using the social media the way that it's meant to be used. And there are also examples of like bots and technological things that are programmed by humans but not humans themselves, sending out hundreds of thousands of messages to people by hijacking hashtags. And so this is important because if you think about how much time you spend looking at social media screens, if you only scroll so far, like if you don't keep going and going for 6 hours on your Facebook newsfeed and you only go for like the first 10 things, what those 10 things are matter. And if they're there because someone paid for it, it's important to realize. So problem 3 is kind of 2 different things. It's both misleading headlines and how quickly false information can spread. I kind of condensed them, but they're 2 somewhat distinct things. So misleading headlines. This was an article from 2012, looking at The Atlantic again. The Atlantic has really good articles, by the way, and I enjoy reading them. But I use them so much in this type of content because they also do things I find questionable when it pertains to this. But they have amazing reporting. But this was one that I never was really able to get over quite. You could tell me what you have concerns with if you saw this headline show up in your Facebook newsfeed. So the headline says Boehner, Republican John Boehner, says out loud that he hopes blacks and Latinos won't show up this election. This is in the previous election. You see this on your Facebook newsfeed. What is your reaction to this? What is your reaction to it? Okay, Boehner's a racist. That might be true, but what else is your reaction to it? Do you click it and read more? Do you share it and say, how outrageous? The title's enough. You can, John Boehner's a racist because he hopes blacks and Latinos won't show out in the election. Do you share it with other people, or are you just like, oh, okay, this guy's a racist and move on? Some people share it. Do you take this headline as 100% accurately representative of what John Boehner said based on the way it's worded? Why or why not? Other than the fact that I'm kind of leading, like this slide sets up the fact that there's something off about it, but what would you think? That's a great point. I definitely advocate looking for multiple sources. The interesting thing about this and many other misleading headlines, because there's one thing about an entire article being misleading. When it comes to a misleading headline, you can often just find the real information in the article. And so many people just read headlines now without ever clicking on it that you can kind of get clarity on this just by clicking on the article. Is there something, I just want to get one thing out of you before I kind of get into the rest of this. Is there something, I can name 2 things about this headline that made me, when I actually saw it, because this was something back in 2012, I'm on Facebook, I saw this, and this was like a true story. There were 2 things about it that I was like, I'm not sure that this is completely right. Only words out of this entire headline in quotes are won't show up. What words are not in quotes? Blacks and Latinos. So we'll see that he actually, whether or not he said those words. But what other word is not in quotes? Hopes is not in quotes. All right. And my other thing about it is just, I didn't think this guy would be stupid enough to say this out loud. I mean, I can't vouch for whether or not he thinks it. And and the Atlantic actually never changed this headline and defended it by saying that they're pretty sure that he thinks it was more or less their justification. I'm not saying whether or not he thinks it, but I didn't think that he was stupid enough to say it. And so I clicked on the article, and the actual quote, and this is only an excerpt, so I had to clarify that it does say early on that the topic of conversation is blacks and Latinos. So, but this excerpt has the pronoun, these groups because, so he says, this election is about economics. These groups have been hit the hardest. They may not show up and vote for our candidate, but I'd suggest to you they don't show up and vote for the president either. Okay? Does that match what the headline said? Yeah, it's a much more provocative headline to say that he thought that he hopes. Now, the Atlantic made an interesting argument. I don't buy the argument, but their argument is that blacks and Latinos are more likely to vote for Democrats. John Boehner's a Republican. He wants a Republican to win. One could make the logical leap that he hopes that they don't vote because that would make it less likely that his candidate would win. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But the bottom line is he never said hope. So the headline shouldn't say hope. And postulating that they might not show up due to the economy is a different statement of fact than hoping that they won't show up. And so, you got to click on an article and just read it. Does anyone know about this one? So there were headlines like this from a lot of different websites. This one, from CBS News. We're talking about reputable. CBS News, fairly reputable, right? So bill would let Michigan doctors, EMTs, refuse to treat gay patients. What do you know about this particular story? So basically what this actually, and there were bills like this under consideration in a couple different states in the past year or two. And the bills themselves are very vague. What the laws say, and this is not an endorsement of the law, but they basically say that if you disagree with something religiously, that you don't have to do it. So you might not have to bake a cake or take wedding pictures for a gay couple if you're against gay marriage. But the bills don't lay out, like, here are the professions and here are the things these professions are exempt from. It's kind of this broad, we are protecting you as a religious person from having to do things objectionable to you. So here's the thing. Theoretically, and this is how a reputable source like CBS can say that and keep it up there still, theoretically, a doctor or an EMT could have a gay patient and say, I'm not in favor of gay people and I don't want to treat this person. And theoretically, that could go to the court, and the court, because we don't know what the court would do, because you never know, could say, okay, I uphold that. I feel like under this law, you're entitled to that. But before we get to this headline, a doctor or EMT has to try it because the bill does not say, okay, EMTs don't have to do this, doctors don't have to do that. And then the court would have to uphold it. So if an EMT was like, I'm not touching this gay guy, then that would go to court, and a judge would read the law and see what the EMT did and decide did that apply to the law. And so we're two pretty dramatic steps removed from this headline. And so I think this bill is worth discussing, and it's worth discussing passionately, because do we want to live in a state, in this case Michigan, who would have a law that would even potentially allow that to happen? That's what democracy is about, is figuring out, do we even want that law as it really is? I don't know if it's a good idea or not. It's a very controversial thing. People have different opinions and feelings about it. But this headline, is really hypothetical. And I think we would do better as a society, like kind of discussing the issues at the here's where we are at a practical level scenario. So that was another thing I think that was designed to catch attention. The oversimplification of complex issues. And this is where the title comes in of discussing politics via memes. Memes, at least how we refer to them today, because meme is a sociological concept that has been around a lot longer than the internet, is something that has a picture with some words on it and people are sharing it around the internet. And a lot of political discussion happens like this. You see stuff like this on your Facebook and Twitter and stuff, right? And so there's a range of problems when you're using memes to discuss politics. And a lot of times memes are intended to be funny, and it's not like you're not trying to take it seriously. It's like just like Saturday Night Live jokes about politics. Memes are the general public who are not Saturday Night Live producers' way to joke about politics, but often they're not meant to joke. They're meant to really make a point about something. And it ranges from it being completely made up to being misleading. So, there's Marco Rubio here, our presidential candidate, saying on 1 month that, felons should not ever have their voting rights restored, and then 2 months later saying that felons should be able to own guns. So trying to make it seem like, Rubio doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would he want felons to have guns but not be able to vote? The problem with this is all the way on the false end of the spectrum. Marco Rubio never said either of those things. Someone just typed stuff onto his picture and put it on the internet, and it got some pretty good reach there. So, you have to be careful about, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true type of thing. The Switzerland one, we'll take the one that looks similar. Switzerland. This is one of the reasons that I haven't been on Facebook in a month, despite being interested in this academically, because I couldn't handle one more post about gun control. But one of the things that often happens is, people look at other countries when it comes to gun control, and, this type of thing goes around Switzerland. 1 in 2 citizens has guns, lowest crime rate in the world. Now, let's assume that those statistics are true. Because Switzerland, people do have a lot of guns, and they do have low crime. I don't know if it's the lowest in the world, but let's assume for this sake of argument that it's true. These are not inherently made up. They do have a lot of guns in Switzerland. They do have low crime. Why is it then a problem to base an entire argument off of this post, even if everything in it is technically true? I'm not even sure if that picture's from Switzerland. It was probably the other problem. I think I probably read somewhere that that's not a picture from Switzerland, but the words, looking at the words, if Switzerland has a lot of guns, well, first of all, what's the person trying to say by posting this? So if an American is posting this about American gun policy, what are they trying to say? And so therefore, we should have more guns. So they're basically saying, they're saying Switzerland has a lot of guns, they have low crime, we should have more guns. What is the problem with the comparison, even if everything on here is technically true? Well, but in general, when you're comparing stuff, you have to have one variable that's different and everything else is the same. The amount of people having guns is not the only thing that's different between Switzerland and the United States. The number of people that live there is different. Poverty might be different. Education might be different. How much people are the same or different ethnically, and how people get along is different. And the biggest thing that I've been able to find out about the Switzerland one is that people are trained on how to use the guns that every other person has. That there's government training for it. There's really strict laws about how they have to be locked, and people really know what they're doing. And most people have guns because they're part of, kind of like a mandatory kind of like militia type thing. Don't quote me in this if you're Swiss. The bottom line is, though, like there's a lot of government imposed training and regulation, and it's just not exactly the same. This is another example of one that's just completely made up, and I include this one because this is really important, because this is the perfect example of what I was talking about earlier when it comes to how you seeing something that's false on social media can have a direct impact on action, not just the thoughts that go up on here. And so this is something that I've seen a couple of times, and you'll note how they say via Snopes. Snopes is a website where you're supposed to go to check stuff if it's true or false. So some people who make stuff up now just say, oh, this is from Snopes, and expect you to believe that you don't have to go check it because they checked it for you. And it's basically saying that some things like the American Red Cross and UNICEF have very low amounts per dollar that go to the actual charity. So they're saying American Red Cross, for example, if you give them $1, 8 cents go to charity. It was interesting at the time I saw this going around the internet, even though it's been going on for years, was NPR had a really interesting article about how the American Red Cross says that it's 94 cents or something per dollar, and the independent investigation is showing it's probably in the 70s somewhere, and that was like a big scandal. But even if the independent investigation is showing it's 70-something cents per dollar, I knew I was like, this 8 cents is like completely made up here, because I know that's going around. UNICEF is not even spelled correctly, first of all. So don't believe stuff. And this is an interesting one that, I'll use this one as an example that me, someone who's up here talking about this, even kind of initially was like, oh, yeah, yeah. So this is saying that this is the entire pie chart of federal spending, that military is making up 57% of it, and that food stamps are within the 1% that's food and agriculture, like not even that whole 1%, but like part of that 1%. And basically saying, Republicans have a problem with food stamps, but they don't have a problem with military spending, even though military makes up this entire 57% and food stamps is like part of 1%. But then when you actually take the time, I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, why would they be okay with that? But when you go and you research into this chart, what you find is that some breakdown of mandatory versus discretionary spending. This is all discretionary spending, which is a whole other budget, and that when you put the whole budget together, like all the stuff that Congress has to spend money on, like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, and all the stuff that they can choose to spend money on, which is all this stuff, not only does it look very different because military shrinks down to maybe 20 or so percent, but that this is technically not just misleading but false because food stamps don't fall into here at all. Food stamps are on that other one. So, the government's complicated. I don't understand the government, but you can do research and kind of like see what people have fact-checked into different stuff. This is one more chart that I wanted to include. This is trying to say that global warming doesn't exist or is negligent in importance because from 1880 to 2010, the average global temperature has risen only this much. And therefore, we have nothing to worry about. What's the problem with this chart? And this is less about social media and more about basic chart reading. But the scale, okay. So this is the same thing. And this is a really cool article from Quartz called the most misleading graphs of 2015. I would look it up if I were you. So the way that they rebuked this presentation of this statistic was genius, I think. And so they made a chart of Sarah and Bob. Sarah and Bob have this average oral temperature each hour of the day. And it looks very similar. Like, oh, we have nothing to be concerned about. But we know Bob needs to go to the hospital and Sarah doesn't. Because Bob has a really bad about 100 fever, and Sarah has a normal temperature. And, that's the same thing. That just because the line's not going up a lot with this huge scale on the axis, that minor increase can, be really good or bad for someone. I was fascinated by this one. Okay, so this is, Darren Wilson. You guys know who Darren Wilson is? The officer who shot Michael Brown. And the Atlantic, no, not the Atlantic, I talked about the Atlantic a lot. The New Yorker did an article that was a profile of Darren Brown. They interviewed Darren Brown. They were the first people, I think, to interview him since the incident happened. And so here's the point I want to make about this, because I'm not taking a side on the New Yorker. Interviewed Darren. Oh, okay. Darren Wilson. I have my wires crossed here of the two people I'm talking about. I apologize for that. Thank you. Darren Wilson. All right. They interviewed Darren Wilson. But here's my point about it, because I'm not taking a side on what happened there or anything. Here's my point. This article, I went and counted it, had 120 paragraphs, over 120 paragraphs. I kept losing count and wasn't going to keep doing it over and over. Over 120 paragraphs of content about their interview with Darren Wilson. And then you go, I'm just going to go to this slide really quick. You can Google New Yorker Darren Wilson, and there are pages and pages and pages of other sites who excerpted and commented on that article and had very starkly different representations of what it said. So just to give you two, you can find one article, or many articles actually, that say Darren Wilson is a racist, it turns out. Because Darren Wilson definitely said very questionable things that would make you pause about his ability to relate with other races and stuff. So there are articles that just quote those things and say, oh, bottom line of this article, you don't have to read it all. Darren Wilson's racist. There's another article and other articles that focus on some of the other stuff in there. So, Darren Wilson, in his viewpoint, was attacked and, the person that Michael Brown was someone who he had to defend himself against. So there's another article that talks about this truth bomb, another dramatic headline, right? Darren Wilson he broke his silence, dropped a truth bomb. I only knew him for those 45 seconds in which he was trying to kill me. And this article is only excerpting the parts of this 120 paragraph article where Darren Wilson is talking about being scared of his life and all this stuff. So out of the same article, you have one that's saying, oh, he's guilty, he's racist. Another one saying, oh, he's innocent, it was self-defense. Both of them are pulling content from the same one article, and this is kind of the same as like clicking the actual headline. Why? If you're interested in this topic, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But if you are interested in this topic and you were trying to like get the information out of this interview, why would you click on any of these when you can just click the actual article and read your firsthand account of their interview with him, as opposed to reading other people's interpretations of it? And I'm just so fascinated by this because in most of the stuff I see in social media, which sparked this entire conversation, is like so like just get to this viewpoint. We want to walk you to this viewpoint. And this article, like, it was very criticized for them giving him so much of a voice and stuff. He's a very controversial figure. But reading it with what I thought was an open mind, it was not walking you towards any side. It was just presenting him, and it just was. It was not to get you to a side. It talked about all of his efforts to be a really good officer and to really relate to the community, and it talked about all of his definitely racist feelings, and I just had a lot, 120 paragraphs. Don't let people abridge stuff for you. And you don't have to read something and take a side. It's just interesting to understand something more. We all followed, I don't make that assumption, but Michael Brown case, we all followed it to some extent. And to sit down and read something that's 120 paragraphs about it, I think it's okay to walk away from that not thinking, oh, that Michael Brown was a thug, or oh, that Darren Wilson was a racist, and just to read 120 paragraphs of content information and understand and have more information and not make a judgment out of it, just have more. And I'm very passionate about that. If you can't tell, I want to get through here. Oh, good. I'm almost to my what we can do slide where you get to talk again. So my last social media problem number 5 is transitioning to a whole other realm of things from the content that we see, which is everything else I talked about was content that we see, and this is how we talk about the content that we see, because a lot of social media is you and your friends' commentary about different articles, and the main problem here is closed-mindedness, incivility, and brevity. There's a really interesting study. And what the study did was it went to the White House Facebook and YouTube pages, and it downloaded all of the comments on some particular post from the White House, and it analyzed the comments. And it found that most of the posts contained unfounded arguments. I'm not really surprised, there. I wouldn't think most of them do. Found that I find this one interesting. Find that most commenters only left one comment. What does that mean? Yeah, they don't care what people thought about what they said. They don't care about responding to what people said that they said. This is not about dialogue. It's just here's my opinion. I'm not even going to read any of your stuff. I'm just going to post what I think about Barack Obama right here and leave. And it's interesting because when we walked in, we were talking about the caucuses, and someone was like, I think that I was reading a lot about the Iowa caucuses and how the Democratic caucus, you stand kind of like in a corner for your person, and you have to try to convince people to come to your side. I couldn't imagine seeing this in person. I think it sounds fascinating. But you're talking to other people in a room and getting them to come to your side. And then somebody, had brought up, well, shouldn't we be able to vote online? Our Tuesday Times Roundtable last week kind of talked about that a little bit too. Should we be able to vote online? And I think democracy should be a lot more about talking than it currently is, and this really shows that we're not having conversations. So we're not having conversations in person that often, and we try to have conversations online, but most people are leaving bad arguments and leaving them there and not coming back and responding to anything. And many of the posts contained uncivil uncivil comments. So if that's the representation of how we're talking about important issues of our democracy online, that's a problem. And of course, there are issues of power and privilege. So many of the posts are relate to social justice issues and different intersections of race and gender and religion. And so many of the comments can be so hostile that it wouldn't be surprising that if one aspect of your identity made you uncomfortable posting your opinion on that subject, especially if your name or your picture and things like that, give it away that you're a member of a certain group. And there's just a lot. The internet is a nasty, nasty place. I'm sure we've all seen it. And those are some of the specific reasons that it's nasty. So what can we do? I don't like to be all negative here. I mean, so if social media is mainly how we communicate with people, not to saying don't use it, but, what can we do, both on social media but outside of it? Like, I've presented all this negative stuff. What are some things we can walk away here doing a little better? Researching the stuff better? Okay. What else? All right, using better reasoning ability. All right, defending your arguments. What about other than the actual use of social media itself? Like, let's assume, and I think we should do that, we should make social media better. It would be kind of a waste of an hour to say that we shouldn't make it better. But let's assume that at least for the next few years, social media is going to be just as bad at presenting the news to us and allowing us to discuss it. What other things can we do outside of social media that can help counteract some of the skewedness that we see? Some ideas. Curating your own news. And so since it's a New York Times Roundtable, I feel compelled to present this particular one where you can, you have access to the New York Times here as a student, both out here, and you can get it digitally from this website. New York Times is one of many sources, and we've talked ad nauseum today about how you have to use more than one source. But if you're getting your news mostly from what other people are posting, then it behooves you to go to a news app or multiple news apps and news sites and look for the things that people aren't posting. I personally think this is a little easier this is the one thing that print newspapers are still good for, maybe, because even on a website or an app, it can be kind of hard to get to like the unpopular stuff. In the newspaper, you can just open it to like near the back and see like what is the stuff that people aren't talking about, as opposed to having to search through a website. Yes, sir. I don't think that voting online is a bad idea. It would actually probably help a lot of people vote who can't get time off of work to go vote or don't have transportation to go vote and a lot of other problems. I'm just also looking at the counterpoint of, since we're talking about people discussing issues and people being well informed about issues, I just find it fascinating. I'm not convinced that it's the way to do it and that Florida and all the other states should switch to a caucus so people go up and talk to each other. I'm making the point that people should be talking to each other more. Like, where are the people in Iowa showing up and talking to each other the whole rest of the year, or are they just posting stuff on social media? I would like to see more people in a room talking. I think you make very valid points about why caucusing to vote versus voting online is not better. But this is my you're getting to, and I appreciate it. My underlined, bolded bullet point here is to take advantage of and to create spaces for offline deliberation. So maybe that doesn't mean while you're voting. You're right. You probably should have your opinions formed before you get somewhere to vote, even if you get to talk about it for an hour. But I'm fascinated by the idea that there is a place for people to come together in a physical, face-to-face room and talk. And so my number one takeaway is to take advantage of and to create spaces for it. Take advantage of by coming to things that are already planned like this, and create it. Plan your own event like this. If you're in a student organization or you want to start a student organization or you're involved in any way, even off campus, if there's something to talk about, find a room, convince people to come to the room, and moderate it in a way that's not just, we're going to present to you, our organization's view on this, but just for people to talk, not to present information to talk. I think that will really help things out a lot, being a decent human being, fact-checking, and getting global perspectives from your news articles and things like that. Any other comments here as I finish proudly right on time? Okay. So, if not, and I thank you for all your participation, then we're done. My email's down here if you're interested in contacting me. And the article that I wrote that gets into a lot of this in much more detail is available if you're logged in through the library and you want to check my sources, it would be kind of ironic to let me tell you all this stuff and you don't make sure that I have sources for all of it. Most of it comes from the article, which has sources and stuff. So, all right, thanks for being here.